Welcome, everyone, to another episode of HR and Payroll 2.0. I'm Pete Tiliakis, and as always, I'm joined by the legendary Julie Fernandez. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks, Pete. What have you got queued up for us today? I know we have a guest that I'm excited to talk to.
Yes. I am so excited. This is someone I've been wanting to have on, and certainly I've had a lot of conversations with in the same spirit as many of our episodes. So I'm very excited to introduce and present and welcome to the HR and Payroll 2.0 show, Nicole Sahin, global EOR pioneer, CEO and founder of Globalization Partners. Welcome to HR and Payroll 2.0.
Thanks so much, Pete. Thank you, Julie, to be here with you guys.
Yeah, pleasure. So, Nicole, if you've paid any attention at all to the podcast, you know I have a burning question that I love to start out with, because I don't think anybody actually begins or thoughtfully tries to get into HR or payroll. It seems like we all just find our way here. And so I'd love to know how it is that you ended up in this space and pioneering EOR and touching all things HR and payroll related.
Yeah, it is a good question. And you're right. It wasn't the intention at the outset, but it just turns out that way. And I love hearing the stories of everybody that you ask on your show, Julie. So basically, I used to be, when I finished grad school, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur with a global focus, and jumped on board with a man with a dream. That was Larry Harding, who was running High Street Partners. And I was the fifth employee, and employees number two was like his wife. Employee number three was his assistant, so it was really early days. And our role was to help startup companies in the Silicon Valley, like Tesla and Infinera at that time, which were in their infancy, when they wanted to hire employees in other countries. And as you know, there's just so much legal nuance that goes with that, and compliance nuance. So our typical answer would be like, before you hire this person in Brazil, you're ready to give an offer to. We have to set up a company in Brazil. It's going to take 9 to 12 months. And then you can register for payroll. Then you can, all these things and set up the benefits. And our team was the drop-in team that would go set up the legal entities around the globe for those clients, and also deal with like the HR issues, the tax issues, the finance issues. And really, it was the intersection of HR, legal, tax, and compliance that makes the world go round when you want to hire people, that we were consulting on. And before long, I had set up 100 companies for 100 clients that were expanding, hiring one guy in the UK, and they just didn't want to have to do that. They just wanted to be able to issue an offer quickly.
Yeah.
And I thought there were some companies that were doing like mom and pop shop style of EOR, employer of record, on the ground in countries, saying, we'll put this guy on your payroll till you set up a company. And I thought that's the solution companies want. But in order for that to work at scale, like if we could make that work at scale, it would have to meet the needs of a public company and like really be compliant. And then it's infinitely scalable, right? But that industry didn't exist. If you were to ask a lawyer at that time, they'd say that's not legal, it's not compliant. But there were reasons, like from a global tax perspective, that it wouldn't impact the government negatively of that country. Like they're still collecting tax revenue if you do it right.
Yeah.
That it could work out well for everybody. And so I just set about, I left that company and traveled for a year and met with tax advisors and lawyers on the ground in 24 different countries, and figured out like I can thread the needle on a country by country basis and make this work. And ultimately went about setting up the company and building it from there.
Yeah. Very cool.
I can't help but ask, like the first thing that comes to my mind, Nicole, hearing that story is, which were the countries that, that were like the no-brainers that everybody wanted to go to?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good question. I mean, at that time, it was like the UK and France and China, Hong Kong, Singapore, Australia, Mexico, Canada. And it's still the same, but the mix of countries has changed over the years for sure. And it's not like you can't just have 10 countries. I think for an employer of record platform, companies really want to know, like wherever they want to hire somebody is where you're going to go. And so we were very quickly expanding our footprint and setting up our own companies around the globe.
Well, I was just going to follow that up with like, so you must have found something about that you loved. What makes you stay?
Well, first of all, I have to say I do love people. What I loved about the global business in the first place was there are unbelievably brilliant and talented people all over the globe. it makes your company and your business and your life so much better when you're hiring people all over the globe. I think it brings people together when they work around the globe. And I
Yeah.
mean, now I think people are used to a lot of diversity and they know that. Like they know there's smart people everywhere. But, 20 years ago, it was
Yeah.
like people outsourced to India because it was cheap. And
Yeah.
and they didn't know people in the Middle East. They didn't know people who wore hijab. And now it's much more common. We're much more fluent cross culturally, but I think we're much more fluent and accepting of other people. Like we can see that we're all human more because we're so used to working cross culturally.
Yeah.
But 20 years ago, we didn't have social media. We didn't see people who were, and I think the media, made us fear people who lived in other countries and feel like other people are different from us.
Yeah.
Another thing that really drew me to this industry overall is like the access to opportunity. It
Yeah.
is amazing to me to witness, again, 20 years ago, it's really cheap to hire people in India. We can pay people $5,000 a year. That's awesome. Great. Okay. But like now what we see is that an AI engineer in India makes just as much as an AI engineer in Ireland. Like there's not like they have equal access to opportunity because we're all working remotely and people are paid not all the time, but it's getting to the point where people are paid for what the value they bring to the table. And I just don't think there's anything more exciting than like the true democratization of opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. The
Yeah.
human enablement and all of this is really, really exciting, right? Just what technology and sort of borderless hiring has cultivated. I think back, Julie, you're probably the same as me. I think back to the times I managed or help scope expat payrolls. And it was interesting because, back then it was scary anyway, even as the payroll leader. I luckily had some great resources that led those parts of my team. But it was scary, right? It was there, and normally, interestingly though, it was a lot of the same people moving around. It was mostly global mobility for bigger companies. But I think back to that, and I think all the opportunities that maybe the company missed out on because they didn't have this sort of agile way of moving people in
Yeah.
different places and plugging and playing resources. So,
Yeah. I
yeah,
think companies still do because I
yeah,
think
they
you
need
either
to.
know about employer of record or you don't.
Yeah,
And I see constantly folks that'll put one or two people on a payroll and actually go through all of those steps and all those pains and wonder if that was even ever considered, right?
yeah.
As
I don't
an
think a lot of
arm.
CHROs know about it, to be honest, and I think they should. It's an
Yeah.
agility lever that helps on both sides of the coin, right? The org agility, but also the human opportunity enablement. So I love all those things. So, well,
Well,
we're
I
glad
think
we have you, Nicole.
once I hear Nicole, like, how could they not be excited to
Yeah,
think about it, right?
I
Let's
know.
go.
I
Let's
know.
dig in.
It is exciting when people haven't heard of an employer of record platform and then they use it. They're like, oh my God, like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
life changing. It's life changing.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
want to talk a little bit about the EOR model. I know you guys do a bit more than that, certainly at GP, but I want to talk about global EOR specifically, given your past. We did a podcast. We called it the Great EOR Differentiation Debate. It was spawned off of this sort of angsty post that I made about the fact that I just still think there's an underwhelming amount of innovation in the EOR space, and I don't think that that's exclusive to technology. I just think there's just a lot of the same. Is all.
Mhm. Mhm.
You guys have been around a long time. I'm just curious. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to that. What are your thoughts on kind of, where are we in terms of differentiation in the market? And what do you think it's going to take to differentiate and be the one standing 5, 10 years from
Totally.
now as an EOR?
I mean, it's a great question. The market's changed a lot. I
Yeah.
would say the reason there's not a lot of differentiation or wasn't a lot of differentiation previously is because the scope of building an employer of record platform is
Yeah.
vast. And I think what you saw a lot of times is a lot of these companies were founded in like right after the pandemic, got a whole bunch of venture capital money, made a fancy front end, and then were like really hustling behind the scenes with bodies and just throwing bodies at it to make it work. Because at the end of the day, doing business in 180 countries compliantly is a lot of work. And so I think
Yeah.
I think the mandate was like, let's make this software scalable, but the reality of that was different. Um, okay, so the differentiation, what do I think is a differentiator, or should be a differentiator? At this point, I mean, I think the differentiators, the basics should be that you have your own legal entities on the ground in all these different countries. It's absolutely necessary. Like you
Yeah.
can't own the compliance or your tech stack until you have your own legal entities on the ground in country. You have to have technology, modular, modern technology. that can be used and is fully automated with AI. I would say companies, a lot of these companies, there's so many stages of the employer of record industry that again was started, you know, uh, 12 or so years ago. And when I say started, there were always mom and pop shops around the globe doing this. But in terms of let's make this a big scalable industry.
Yeah.
If you started 12 years ago, you could have done it as mostly a services industry, like a contracting type business.
Yeah.
So
A
I
lot were
think,
born there.
yeah.
Yeah.
So if companies didn't get their data organized, start building software early enough, then those are kind of they're not going to thrive in the future. Also, AI, again, getting your data organized, building AI. In order to have AI that's successful at this point across such a vast scope of doing business internationally, you had to start getting your data organized at least 3 years ago, right?
Yeah.
In order to even keep up.
100%.
And then compliance, huge differentiator. There's a lot of news being made about companies that aren't compliant with various employment regulations in lots of different countries. Companies want that. I mean, we close. We have a very high close rate, and it's because once they hear of other companies more frequently, but when they come to us and they hear about our compliance background and history of having zero legal issues over 12 years of doing business. That's so compelling. It's just really important. Like when you choose an employer of record platform, you are outsourcing your legal, HR, and compliance,
Yeah.
ultimately the integrity pinnings of your company to a third party. So it has to be compliant and
Agreed.
to meet
Yeah.
the needs of a public company or a company that's going to go through a transaction. So I would say all of that is the basics. What's going to make a company successful in the future, again, is their AI current status enables future status. And then separately, I think service is actually really critical. It's probably underestimated, but the quality of service that you offer people is really important. Even if you can use AI, you still have these nuanced situations on the ground in country.
Yeah.
When you're employees in a hospital, you don't want to talk to an AI chat box. You
Yeah.
need to get on the phone and talk to somebody. Um, and then also integrations. So companies now, EOR used to be one or two people in this country or that country. Now it's being used as mainstream, but it might not be used for all your employees. It probably never will be used for 100% of your employees.
Right.
Then the question is, it has to be integrated into whatever else you're using from an HR tech perspective. So whether it's ADP or Workday or TriNet or Insperity or whatever, it's needs to be really integrated and feel like a play. And that's where I think we're seeing a big battle fought out in the partner ecosystem right now. Also, the reason integrations are critical is because the AI chatbots have to be able to and the agents have to be able to talk to each other and liaise. So, while I know that's not really tech innovation, Pete,
Yeah. Well,
it
no,
is what
no,
it is.
but it is. I think it is, right? Applying. I mean, I heard the key thing there. I think I heard, and I personally feel is what's going to differentiate many of the firms is going to be their data and their insight, and being able to productize and bring that to the customer's hands. And I think you guys have taken a step right with Gia. By the way, your beta is available now. I think anyone can use that. Tell us about that, because I know you guys are sitting on this rich data set. I've played around with Gia a little bit, and I'd love to actually segue this because I know you guys have a new report, AI at Work report that I want to talk about. You guys have just sneak previewed for us. So let's talk about that, because I think that's something that, to me, and Julie, we've been talking about data, getting data ready, right? I think that's a big part of being able to use AI here. But talk about that a little bit, about how you guys have brought your insight and data and bring that to life with Gia.
Sure. Yeah. So what we did with Gia, so Gia is a separate software product that ultimately any company can use. Doesn't have to be using our employer of record platform. But the idea of Gia is that if a company wants to get HR or advice around their employment related to an employee internationally, they would log into Gia, and Gia is a software product, AI enabled software project or HR agent that, like, if a company has a question like, hey, my employee's moving from Austin to San Francisco, here's his employment contract, what do I need to do? Then the Gia will take that information and guide the customer all the way through it, pop out a new employment contract, localize it, and we do that in 50 countries and 50 states at this point. So we've launched with 50 countries and 50 states. It's based on, I think, almost a million, instances of our own team using our own lawyers doing things internationally.
Yeah.
And all this data that we have, basically Jira tickets and that type of thing, of how have we dealt with all these employees internationally and across 50 states. So, yeah, we've trained it to think like a lawyer. It has less than 1% hallucination rate. So, I think the idea is that right now, when you want to hire an employee in another country, you typically have to pick up the phone and call an employment lawyer in that
Yeah.
country. And it's expensive, time consuming. You have to, know your client data filled out for that lawyer. Like, it could take a month to find a lawyer you can
I
talk
was
to and get
thinking the
good
same
advice from.
thing. You can
And
take a month
instead,
to
Gia,
navigate internally. Yeah.
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 So Gia's at your fingertips. And it's not that it would replace a lawyer, but it's like the outsourced legal cost. And a lot of times it's not even really legal advice that
Yeah.
you need. It's competent, how are things done on the ground in country. It's not intended to replace, using a lawyer, but it's intended to put the information at your fingertips that you need
Yeah.
when
Speeds
hiring
decision making
everywhere.
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
I have a
Yeah.
question about that though. As you open it up, for folks to try and to experience, is there not any risk that that Gia learns bad information or, if you're pretty darn accurate right now, like is there any risk that just others using or testing, or it's our human nature to try to break something or like fool it or trick the
Yeah.
expert or whatever? How do you keep
Well, it's not
keep
going to
Gia safe?
learn. Yeah, and in terms of not learning bad data, we have humans reviewing the data, and then we review the data that's
Yeah.
ingested, and we've figured out how to automate that in a really quick way. Actually, we did that before DeepSeek did it. And so we've been very careful and innovative in how we confirm the data going into Gia. In addition, it's not open source information.
Right.
We're not
That's
open.
key.
Yeah, it's not. And then we're also using, we're just really careful in how we vet the data that goes into Gia. So, and we also don't use client information. So we're not,
Right.
yeah, we're careful with what goes into Gia for that
Yeah.
reason. Good question. Very good question. And I'll say a lot of other companies that have launched similar products, they're just using repackaged Chat GPT information, which is, I mean,
Scary.
that's not what people need.
Yep. Yeah. That's the difference, I think, in having your own proprietary LLMs, right? It's very important to understand that in these tools as you're engaging them.
That's like taking a roller coaster ride instead of, instead of a nice Pioneer Jungle Cruise, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Nicole, I want to dig into this report because I thought it was pretty cool you guys have this out. And thank you for giving us a sneak peek of this. Look, let's maybe I want to kick around a few of the data points and see if we could just sort of get your point of view on AI, what you guys are doing, where it's headed, and how people can really maybe get the most out of it. Because we've had a lot of appetite for our AI discussions, Julie, as you probably can imagine. So look, one of the things I thought was pretty interesting, right? I think you guys interviewed about 2,000 or so businesses for this. Nearly 3/4 of the executives, I think it was 74%, viewed AI as critical to the success of their companies. 60% saying that the company is aggressively using AI to innovate their industry. That's a huge number, right? I mean, and it's mixed across industries. I've seen different data sets. But Nicole, like, what are you seeing just in terms of that, right? From the perspective of AI industry wide, engaging it for the workplace or just for their businesses?
Yeah. I mean, it is really interesting to see. I mean, it's really fun to see too. I would say everybody's trying to figure it out. And there's some companies definitely taking a lead, and obviously that's where our bets are placed of who's going to win, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's no time to lose. Things are moving so fast with AI that, again, it's almost like you had to be thinking of it 3 years ago to be launching products now.
Yeah.
So I guess what we're seeing, everybody's trying to figure it out. Everybody, and some companies are way ahead than others, and I think right now what a lot of people are trying to figure out is how are the agents going to integrate? How are we going to layer data in? How do you keep the data sourced? And everybody's, like, a lot of the big players in HR tech are really trying to figure out which companies do they want to work with? Which ones do they choose? It's really exciting time right now.
Yeah. The interesting thing is, though, going further in that data, right, we saw that only 3% of them trust AI to actually make any decision, right? And certainly, as they should, everything should be on the table for monitoring AI or any technology at this point. And we've talked a lot about the fact that you have to get yourself in shape as an
Mhm.
organization to be able to really use AI well. And that starts with having very healthy data. But kind of beyond that, like, what do you see as maybe some of the barriers to the AI decision making trust and sort of being able to
Well,
lean on that more?
I think the big thing is like people who are actually using it don't trust. I think there's multiple things. People who are actually using it don't trust it, and they probably shouldn't. And just to give you an example, like I mean, I use ChatGPT to like do a horoscope for me and a
Yeah.
friend the other day, and I was like, actually, that's not actually like those actually aren't my astrological signs, like so it
Yeah.
can't even do an astrology chart. So I don't want Chat GPT doing an HR document for me.
Yeah.
So I that. And so I think related to that, since most people are using Chat GPT or just experimenting a little bit, they don't really understand how to vet whether a product is made or solid. So just to share some of the inner workings behind with Gia, what we've seen, some of
Yeah.
the big companies in the world are checking out Gia, and they'll get a team of lawyers on, representing 10 countries. And we're like, hey, we didn't say Gia's passed the bar exam. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
Gia is a good tool to use to replace, 95% of your global HR and legal outsourcing costs. And Gia hasn't passed the bar exam. She's not hallucinating. She's not, but yeah, maybe
Yeah.
a lawyer make a different choice, but like you're kind of it's a tool, right? It's a tool to put things at your fingertips, and somebody should still use that information, make a decision. If it's a big decision and they should still use a lawyer, or work
Yeah.
with a but it's basically the speed to access and getting the vast majority of it through a tool they can trust.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
companies don't know who they can trust or what tools. They don't understand AI. And finally, when you think about lawyers vetting something, they're conservative by nature. I also think there might be an element of like people don't want to be replaced.
Yeah.
And
Right.
little so so there's a lot, but and this type of assessment can stress people out. But at the end of the day, I think that's going to have to stop within about a year, because if you're
Yeah.
not using a tool like Geo and your competitors are, I mean,
Yeah.
it's just going to work, and the
Yeah.
tool
I agree.
be trusted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things you said earlier when we were talking about the EOR model is just the integration into systems, right? To being able to
Mhm.
connect all of that data, the rich data that you guys provide, the data from the front lines, the data from the business ops, the data from HR. But I actually think there's even more to it than just the data, right? It's just the integration of EOR as a solution in the
Totally.
broader HR strategy. But where do you see, give me your thoughts on that around how AI, because I think that's what would be most robust is, right, being able to say, look, we have EOR as a lever for our organization's
Mhm.
strategic needs from an HR perspective and a compliance perspective. But we also have this data, right, to help us model things very quickly. And, I know we've all probably been there, right, with the CFO or someone coming to you saying, hey, I need a business case for this, just ballpark for this thing we're thinking about. That could take weeks in the regular world. Now with AI, you could obviously give at least some ballpark information and get the things going, right? Get the conversation going, maybe even get action going faster. But what else, like, do you see as far as that integration between, say, the service itself, but also this data and insights to help them make good decisions and do other things?
I mean, I think it's a game changer, and it's what we were waiting for. I mean, at the
Yeah.
end of the day, I've always felt like it's coming, and like all of this can be so easy, but it actually took AI, because maybe as an entrepreneur, I
Yeah.
underestimated the vastness of the complexity of all the global
It was
laws.
always there. We just didn't know how to get to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
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 And now we have AI as a tool, like just the ability to consume vast quantities of data and make, complex and ever-changing legal landscape simplified was kind of the point of an employer of record, and now it can stay up to date and easy to use. And yeah, it just is such a game changer. I think it's the future of
Yeah.
how people will be employed, because why set up all these different entities all over the globe?
Yeah.
It just makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, I've heard more larger organizations talking about using EOR even as sort of cost management for entities and long tails, where it's something they're saying like, well, we don't necessarily want to operate this entity ourselves. Well, we need it.
Mhm.
Maybe we'll use an EOR to help us as and when versus necessarily maintaining all of that. So is
Yeah.
that something you guys see as well, or?
Yeah, we see people shutting down entities because they just don't wanna have to
Yeah,
deal with it.
Yeah.
yeah,
It's so much work and it's really complicated.
yeah,
But I think between the combination of GIA, which can help companies manage their own entities, and, when they have to have them, and using EOR much more, I do think companies are getting way more comfortable with an employer of record platform, and, we're just gonna see more and more adoption of it. It's a
yeah.
no-brainer.
Yeah, it's definitely a stepping stone to the next level for companies. I think it bridges that gap of risk and angst and anxiety with going somewhere new. But Nicole, so one of the things I want to ask you about is just, we always whip HR for like, you're not strategic enough. You don't add enough value. Payroll gets it, right? I mean, obviously they're probably the worst recipients, but how do you think AI is going to help shift that HR and payroll from being
That's a good
seen as
question.
maybe process oriented to being more of strategic leaders?
Yeah, that's great. Well, at the end of the day, talent is how you build a business, and having and access to markets, right? And you access market through being able to hire salespeople globally. So at the end of the day, flattening those barriers and making it possible for companies to get access to talent everywhere, it just puts a lot more tools at an HR person's fingertips to be able to say, "I can make this happen, and here's how." Like, this is a core business fundamental need. It always was, and now that's available more than ever for I think for people to be creative, come up with solutions, and get things done.
Yeah, the speed. I think the speed and agility, it just goes really well with the whole, just what the value prop I think of global employment is, right? And global EOR is helping people get to an answer very fast, versus weeks, not months, sort of
Exactly.
value prop. So I love that. Julie, did you have something? I'm sorry.
No, I know. Oh, my mind's going all sorts of places, as I think about companies really exercising this muscle more, right? And not necessarily jumping to build an entity every time they need employees somewhere. And it also makes me think of all the safe gates that you have to have in place. Like, how do we know? My mind started thinking about blockchaining. How do you know when a person's holding more than one role
Oh my
in
god.
different places? Because it becomes easier to access and tap talent, and people are doing it, and they're doing it through a very decent, through a lot of different partners that they could be using. Likewise, the candidate or the resource themselves could be, has numerous outlets to go to. And so I'm sure that's the next level kind of a challenge. But I don't know if you see stories or hear anything, about safeguards, Nicole, as we make this easier to tap talent. Like, what do we have to be aware of? What are the risks of making it easy to get talent somewhere and not have to set up, you know,
Man,
the whole
that's
organization?
a good question. I mean, I think look, I mean, you've been in HR for a long time. I never fail to be amazed by the stuff that pops up. I mean, it is the most humorous part of my job. I'm just
It's true.
if we could all just build widgets and it would work, like from an engineering perspective, life would be easy, but the people are what makes it both fun and completely unpredictable.
Crazy.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think an EOR can resolve that, right?
No,
Like,
I
with
don't think
people
so either.
being a
Yeah.
little wild sometimes. I will say it makes it easier to hire and fire people, which is a huge relief, because if you come up with somebody stealing your corporate IP, somebody having multiple jobs, whatever it is, at the end of the day, having a team on board that can help you let that person go and manage things legally behind the scenes is worth its weight in gold. Also, a key reason why it's not just software, and I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
I think a lot of venture capitalists got into this industry, threw a whole bunch of cash at it with the idea of we can automate everything to make it a
Yep.
good platform. You can automate a lot of it and it's good business. But at the end of the day, you do need HR people and legal teams behind the scenes in
Yeah.
every country that are backing up that employment of record platform and the client.
Yep.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Emotional intelligence always wins.
oh
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And you got to go to court. I mean, if somebody stole your IP, you have to protect it.
Yeah.
And that goes back to what you were saying, Pete, about the differentiation. I mean, the things that we've seen in this industry, and I think we're probably coming to the end of new companies popping into this space thinking, I think we're at the end of that. I think we're at the tail end probably.
I wish.
But you're like, don't be so hopeful.
There's
But
too many. There's too many out there.
yeah, but basically, so what we've seen is like some employer of record platforms say, well, if you have a problem with the employee, you have to go deal with it yourself. Well, how? Because they're not the client's not the employer, so they
Yeah.
have no legal
Right.
standing to actually execute on that, much less an HR team on the ground in country. So you actually have to invest in a decent employer of record platform that has a team to back you up on the ground in different countries and will stand behind what they're offering.
Yeah, I think it's so cool that, like a lot of times the EOR value, doesn't call out often enough. Not only the fact that you're finding the talent in many cases, right? So there's a motivation to have some of that relationship there, but then also the agility isn't just adding talent, it's exiting talent as
Yeah.
well. And that happens in, a robust M&A divestiture, like the world is just moving fast.
Offboarding as a service. It's a
Yeah,
real thing.
it's
That's
It's a real
so
true.
thing.
funny.
You don't
Yeah.
think about that angle as much, but it's a value for sure.
Yeah. One of the things I thought was interesting in your report, Nicole, was, I think there's this idea that, well, AI is just going to replace everybody. It's definitely the media's told HR and payroll, we don't need you anymore. We're just going to process it
Mhm.
and do it all without you, which we've talked about, right? Is the fact that, and I actually think it's not so much about replacing. It's, I'm aging myself. We've talked about this before, Julie, about back when the internet was really coming online. It was largely about, you kept hearing the media talk about fewer but better jobs. And I actually think that that's sort of the result of AI too, right? I was reading here that the World Economic Forum says by 2030, 170 million jobs will be created, but only 92 million jobs around the globe will disappear for a net growth of only about 78 million. Okay. So basically, it's a different job, right? We're just changing the
Yeah.
job. But like that idea that, oh, it's all about just replacing people. Like, what are your thoughts on that, Nicole? And I want to leave you with something that came from your report that I thought was very interesting, in that almost half of the respondents said they would leave their employer to go to one that offered AI if the other
Mhm.
didn't. So it's kind of interesting, right? It's like we're seeing people say, yeah, we want to use it, we want to engage it, but at the same time, there's this perceived threat of it. So just curious what your thoughts are on all of that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't hear anybody talking about wanting to replace people with AI. I hear them talking about wanting people to be able to do their jobs more quickly. Um, so we can start there. I mean, I haven't
Yeah.
heard that from anybody.
Yeah.
I do think companies are reluctant to hire people to do jobs that AI could do. So they want to be
Yep.
mindful that they're not hiring people redundantly, that are going to be, that they're not going to need. So there is that. But what I actually am a little bit more concerned about is just from a human perspective. What I see right now is things are moving so quickly that I feel like executives are getting overwhelmed by the speed and pace of information.
Mm.
I don't think the working model of we're all going to work 50 hours a week for 50 years and take 2 weeks vacation a year is going to work.
Yeah.
Like people
Yeah.
need to check out and take a break sometimes. And it's a little too fast, and it's going to get so much faster. So I'm a little more concerned about what is the social model behind how people deal with the speed
Yeah.
and amount of data flowing into the human brain. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the bandwidth, right, to have all these things, to be able to, you're right, synthesize them. Hopefully AI is going to help us. I mean, look, I love the agentic and the autonomous nature of things coming online saying, hey, we can produce for you. We can go run down a checklist for you. That sort of thing, I think in the HR space is going to be really big, is being able to just relieve people of doing the minutia and focus on
Mhm.
the anomalies, right? Focus on the exceptions and focus on the value added stuff. So, I don't see it,
Yeah.
again, to your point, as a replacement. I see it more of a performance enhancing drug, right? In a lot of ways, a tool. So,
Well, especially in HR, because when people think about a
yeah,
really good HR person, they don't even know how much stress and complexity goes into the paperwork or running payroll. They're thinking about like the situation where you do have an employee who you find out has another job, or like the somebody's having, is grieving and needs emotional support, but also has a job to do, or like we got to move this guy out and find some new people. Like
Right.
those are the hard things that require a lot of EQ. And that's also what motivates most HR people. It's why they want the job. Yeah. So I think there's just a good HR person is worth so much more than the amount of paper they can push. So
Yeah.
if they can take that off their plates, it really enables them to do their job better.
Right. And I mean, even just like, I don't know about you, Julie, but like even just brainstorming. If I'd have had the tool back when I was an HR leader, like being able to model out org changes, model out decision making, ask questions about a certain idea that we have, refining a process, right? Improving an outcome for a process. Maybe it's not just process improvement, maybe just doing it differently in a different order. Any of those things, I think it would be amazing to have something thinking for you, helping you get through that research and that sleuthing, if you will, to get to that answer. Like, oh, I didn't think of that, but you did think of it. You're just kind of bouncing it off of a bot full of money, full of information, full of data that can come back with good ideas and help you strategize. I think there's so much benefit of that in any role that you do. Right.
Totally.
Yeah, I think when you first start tinkering with it, right? Like you yourself limit what you might even try to do with it. And it's only after you start playing around a little bit where you're like, wait a minute, let me think bigger about what this could look like. And I love what you said earlier, Nicole, about just the idea of people need a break as well in jumping and racing, because I believe that the different generations of the workforce are all going to kind of settle into their own comfort level and skill set with AI as we go forward. And the idea that you can jump from thing to thing or take your break, and that might mean I leave employment somewhere and I just pick it up again when I'm done with a break. And there's a means and ways to get caught up and to learn quickly and do rapid things rapidly is something that younger generations will actively use these types of tools for. And maybe some of us older generation folks, like, well, wait a minute, I'm not trying to jump around a whole lot. I just want a smooth landing. What can I do, that helps me do my job better? So there's probably very different flavors of how AI will try to be used in the workforce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nicole, how do you see, just to kind of round this out, how do you see, what's your vision for AI and, to impact global employment and the global workplace, I guess? And what are kind of some of the biggest challenges with that you think we need to be alert to before we get there?
I mean, I think the opportunity is to have everything just seamlessly really connected and like fully integrated across like whatever accounting system you use, whatever payroll provider you use, like a full like agentic AI integration that puts so much data at your fingertips. Like I just think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity to weave it all together, but it requires cooperation across companies.
Yes.
And thus big companies have a lot of opportunity to choose winners and losers in that. And it's a huge race right now. So it's really exciting.
Yeah.
But the future is a lot easier than it has been. So that's what's exciting about it. And I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for all of us as humans.
Yeah. I love that democratization of integrating things. I think the more we do that, the more we accept sort of sharing data across platforms that we use in our lives, I think the more we can get nudged and guided and certainly lifted up with that insight, right? So kind of matches my payroll everywhere concept as well. But look, to kind of round this out, like what would be some sort of, I always ask something along this lines, I'm hoping you don't mind, just what would be your lessons learned, like for an organization really trying to figure out how to integrate AI into their workplace strategies, or just sort of paralyzed, right? Maybe haven't started, or maybe just slow starters. Like what would be your advice or tips for them to get going on the path?
I would say vetting which tools you use and making sure that you're someone with a tech orientation that can vet the tools is really valuable. And separately to that, I mean, it's just a real problem when employees start uploading things to Chat GPT or anything like that. So having that on lockdown
no IP.
Absolutely critical, because people don't understand what they're doing when they do that. I mean, it's a bummer. It can have a really negative impact. So I think it comes down to security.
Yep.
Is probably the first thing. And then finding some tools and getting started. Like I would say, if you're an entrepreneur or a CEO and you don't have a good tech team, man, you better get on it,
Yeah,
So
that's a great point. I heard, I've said this before, but I think that I remember years ago, I heard the CEO of Delta say something about the fact that they were a tech company.
Mhm.
And some folks laughed at that, right? And I think that was a very, very smart bet. I think anyone today in
Yes.
business, you have to be a tech company and you have to use tech in your organization. And AI certainly is one of the most powerful that we've seen in a long time. So I love what it's doing for HR. I love what it's doing for businesses and for the consumer
Mhm.
and all of this. So I'm excited to see where it's going to go, next. So anything else, Julie, before we wrap up?
No,
No, good.
I'm excited for you to tell us all where we can reach Nicole
Yes, Nicole.
and
Where's
what's
the
next.
Yeah, where's the best place to get a hold of you? I'll make sure we put the links in here to the new report, the AI at Work, and also to certainly the beta for GIA. But where can everyone get in touch with you?
Yeah. So our company URL is g-p.com for Globalization Partners. And me personally, Nicole Sahin on LinkedIn. If anybody wants to try out GIA and give it a test run, as I mentioned, it's free for everyone right now. They can access it through the GP website and sign up and have instant access.
Yeah, very cool. I'll make sure to drop those in there. I played around with it. You can see it on my LinkedIn post. I think I used Columbia, if I recall correctly, to mess around with that. So I've seen a lot of vendors and buyers going to Columbia. So it'd be good. I thought that was a good one, but I thought it was really cool. It was actually kind of fun, right? Just kind of trying to come up with questions that I thought would be really really in the moment, and it was spot on every time. Just really coming back with it. So I love that. I love
Thanks for
that speed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very
Yeah.
cool. Well,
Yeah.
check it out. And yeah, look, we'll continue the conversation on AI here. Thank you so much, Nicole, for coming on. And as always, we'll talk to everyone soon.